Hi everyone, it's William with the latest 1906 video. I've got my toy soldiers, of course, and I'm very happy to say that today our little friend is in an excellent mood. He's back to being his lively self, and so that is nice. His diary entries really change when that's the case, and even if he doesn't specifically mention that his mood has improved, and in this case he actually does. Even without that, you can tell when his mood is lousy and when his mood is good, and now his mood is good. All right, so I did a little research after all. I don't like looking at photos of dead fish, so I am reluctant to look things up about fish online, but went ahead and did some, and I did get thoroughly grossed out, but I was willing to make that sacrifice on your behalf, and I found out that the fish they're catching that Dimitri describes in this instance. Before he talked about perch, this time he's talking about chub and roaches, which look very carp-like to me, and carp are probably my least favorite fish in the world. But two of the words that he was using that I assumed were types of fish were actually tools for catching fish. So in one case, nets, and in the other case, I think some kind of fish trap that live fish swim into. But anyway, that's cleared up, and let's dive in. It's 31st May, it's a Wednesday, and he's writing in Ilinskaya. All right, we ended up catching 8 fish in the net, 1 chub, and 7 roaches. Today, Alesia and her sister Fofichka arrived. I like her a lot, and the little one is cheeky. We got up at 7:30, had coffee at 8 o'clock, then went for a ride, after which I went out on the boat, then played soldiers with Borya until lunchtime. After lunch, I worked with the soldiers, weaving a carpet, and at 4 o'clock, when it was time for tea, everyone went to Archangelskaya, and I was on horseback without Georgy Mikhailovich, but with Mashkovsky. He rides better than GM, but doesn't know how to hold a horse in check and control it. That outing lasted 2 hours, and after that, until dinner time, I helped Sasha and Mikhail Vasilyevich with the nets, one of which is huge. I hope I can catch something tomorrow. After dinner, we took a walk. Tyotia apparently wants to spend time with us, but it's noticeable that she's doing it in a way that one would spend time with guests. But overall, I'm happy, though I still miss Peterhof. I fell from my bicycle today so hard that I tore off a big piece of skin from my elbow and 2 buttons from my boot, along with meat. My brake was soft and didn't clamp when it should have, so of course I went hurtling to the ground. 9:30. Okay, wow, what an eventful day. The friends that I have who have teenagers would be absolutely thrilled if their children spent so much time doing active activities outdoors. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and she was bemoaning the fact that already her 8-year-old is wanting to do nothing but play games on the phone, and so much so that he has a certain amount of time. He's allowed a certain amount of time every day to do that, and he kind of schedules his day, or he chooses what time and sort of schedules his day around that to make sure he won't be a minute late, and he'll get the most out of his time. And in fact, they were just on a trip to Hawaii, and so the little one was actually even doing this in Hawaii. So, I guess parents had an advantage back then, especially if they just happened to have country houses. And I think we can attribute all of this fun activity, we can attribute Dimitri's change of mood to all of this fun activity, and especially the fishing, and he's going out and spending time with adult men and really enjoying it. All right, so he seems to, it's interesting to me from a linguistic standpoint that the Russian word for a roach is plotva, but he uses a slightly different spelling. He writes it platva, and it's not a mistake because then he puts in parentheses the correct word. So it must have been the way these fish were referred to in that area, maybe by the peasants, and that was the word that people used. So when I initially tried to look it up, I didn't get anything, and then I realized that, that the spelling was wrong. But because he had given me the correct spelling, I could figure out what was going on. All right, so these two girls turn up. We don't know how old they are, but one is, it sounds like a teenager, and the other is a little, and she is mischievous. But Dmitri likes the older sister. The names are odd. Alesia, that's probably a standard Russian name, maybe for this time period. I've never met a girl named Alesia, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I don't think it's supposed to be like Alyosha with the yo sound. Anyway, in transliterated letters, it's spelled Alesya. So if any of you know, are Russian speakers and you know about that name, maybe you can comment on that. The little girl is called Fofochka, which is Russian in form with the CHKA ending, but I don't know about the fofo part. That sounds more like one of these sort of infantile nicknames that were so popular among the aristocracy and royalty. They like these really, like, Fruity and Baba and Mookie, I think, was one of them, and Don't Ask Me Why, Boy, things like that. So, I wish I knew who these girls were. We will hear more about them. All right, so one of the things that surprised me in this one was the time he spent weaving with the soldiers. He was so worried about I don't know the impact, what the impact was going to be with having these 28 soldiers at Ilinskaya. And if you recall, he wrote very dramatically in one of his diary entries, everything is ruined. But he hasn't complained about them, and he is in fact now, whether in the presence of Aunt Ella or on his own, he's actually learning how to weave along with these soldiers who are also learning how to weave as part of their rehabilitation. They appear to be soldiers whose injuries are such that they could not have gone and resumed, they couldn't stay in the army, and they didn't have skills or the ability to go and get other civilian jobs, so they're being taught a trade and they're being taught crafts. I think Dmitri had mentioned in one of his previous entries how the soldiers were making these sort of marvelous little wooden decorative boxes, and so these soldiers at Ilinskaya are learning how to weave. And Dmitri, I think we have seen by now, really enjoys doing things with his hands. He likes working with his lathe, even though, he's not officially taking lessons now, and he's already had his final exam in woodworking. He brought it with him to Ilinskaya, and he likes working on it. And judging from this and future diary entries, he seems to enjoy this weaving activity. And we know how model railroading was something he really enjoyed. So that seems to have been a natural characteristic with him, that he enjoyed carpentry and other kind of handicrafts. All right, so Arkhangelskaya. So that ending, just like with Tsarskaya, Selo, and Krasnaya Selo. So that ending of the OYE, that is the neuter adjective ending in Russian, and it's attached to a name that has the word Selo. So Tsarskaya Selo, Tsarskaya, that is the Tsar's, an adjective, and then Selo means a village. So since he's writing Arkhangelskoye, he's leaving out the word Selo. So this is some village, maybe like Tsarskaya and Krasnaya. It's become a small town instead of just sort of a rustic village, and they go there for tea. And he is already quite an accomplished horseman. He's been having, he's been receiving instructions as a future cavalryman since the time he was little. And I think GM and Mashkovsky both were officers from infantry regiments. So they're not as comfortable on horseback as he is, and Dmitri is already at a skill level where he can critique their riding, and he would, of course, as we know, participate with the Russian Olympic team, equestrian Olympic team, and he would enjoy later on doing steeplechase activities. They would have a big cours hippique every year in St. Petersburg, and he loved that sort of thing. And I'm told that he was basically, before the war broke out, he was a horse trainer in his regiment, that was the skill that he had, that he was really able to contribute in a genuine way to the Horse Guards Regiment. So anyway, that is a little aside. I don't know who Sasha and Mikhail Vasilyevich are, who were doing something with the nets, but again, Dmitri enjoys this sort of working with the hands, making something kind of activity. And probably the most interesting thing in this diary entry is what he says about Ella, that it's apparent, it's obvious that she does want to spend time with them and pay attention to them, but to Dmitri, who is ever vigilant about adults and what their attitude and level of engagement is with him, not just on a superficial scale, but he's really looking for the little gradations of approval, disapproval, willingness to spend time with him. And it's quite understandable that he developed that as almost a kind of survival skill, because, even though there was never going to be an issue about him not having, obviously, a roof over his head and food on the table and somebody to take care of him, he's still, any child who's in that position where he's being moved from household to household, and even earlier than that, his father seems to have been quite a hands-off parent and quite detached. And of course, a lot of parents were in that day and age, but then maybe if there had been a mother in the household and she had been more of a hands-on mother, then maybe Paul would have taken more interest in his children as well. But at any rate, the bottom line is that he had developed, in response to a genuine need, this adaptation of being sort of hyper-vigilant with adults and how they were treating him and their general attitude toward him, and whether that became a maladaptive trait when he was an adult is something to keep in mind as we're going through the adult diary entries. And as you can see, just about everybody in my family except me, everyone is a social worker. And I've been working for years now, also I've mentioned, with a Russian-American psychologist who works with teenagers. And so I've picked up, probably to a comical extent, this, sort of in automatic analysis of people and their whether rightly or wrongly. I think as a novelist, it's quite a useful thing. But I should say I've been working with this Russian American psychologist as a sort of an ESL teacher, and now also as kind of a cultural intermediary, and not as a client. Although, yeah, there's nothing wrong with working with a psychologist. That is beneficial for everybody. Okay, so going off on a tangent there, the last little part is, of course, about having this bicycle accident because the brakes weren't working as well as they should have. And okay, so we have a word here that's difficult to translate, koja. So it could be skin, it could be leather. You don't have that distinction, that clear distinction as you would in English between skin and leather. And so I don't know if he was wearing, say, for instance, a leather jacket, or whatever garment he was wearing was torn at the elbow, or whether he actually skinned his elbow, as we say in English. So basically scraped the skin off. But then there's also interesting when he uses the word for meat. It must indeed have been quite a hard fall because he loses buttons from one of his boots. And when he talks about meat, he uses the word for meat, the same word that you would use, an unequivocal word, like the English word meat, miaso. So is he talking about flesh? Is he talking about the buttons came off and also some of the flesh on his ankle? Or is he talking about some of the leather from his boot? I don't know, but I will say that going forward for the diary entry of 1st June 1906, that he's still doing all of his outdoor activities and he's not complaining about being hampered in any way by the injury to his elbow or to his ankle. And I guess because he's wearing boots, my guess is that maybe then that means he's wearing a sailor suit, or at least he's not wearing a uniform. I don't know what teenage boys wore in 1906. Okay, so if we look at this from the 3 criterion that I brought up yesterday, history, Dmitri himself, and noteworthy people, well, we don't have any of the last 2, except we definitely are learning a lot about Ella. We are, seeing further how Dmitri was interacting with the world in general. And we are, from a historical perspective, well, we're just getting a good view about how someone of means, whether royal or not royal, in this instance, would spend the summer on a country estate. And also, a little bit about the efforts that were being made in Russia to deal with this problem that's always a problem after any war for soldiers who come back and they're wounded and they're not necessarily greeted by society with open arms and, given jobs and accommodated. So Ella is doing her part with that, and I have no idea what was being done for soldiers who did not have a Grand Duchess as a patroness, and if there was some kind of social safety net for them. I don't know. That'd be an interesting thing to research. All right, so I'll see you next time. Bye.